The French working class and the British working class have huge differences. So hear me out, because I'm a British communist, right? And we don't tend to have the best relationships with the French. We have a love-hate kind of relationship. Historically and contemporarily speaking, we don't tend to get on very well. But hear me out. I'm a British communist and I'm going to give huge props to the French working class. Because they actually have balls. They have courage. They have bravery. They can actually fight when stuff isn't fair. And they are willing to sacrifice their liberty, their health, their safety, their security, their job. They're willing to throw all of that away to protest government authoritarianism and anti-worker legislation. And that's exactly what they're doing. The protests in France right now is a working class movement. It's led by workers, it's a grassroots organisation, and it's not only fighting the pension reform, which is what the protests initially were about. They are now about a general, broad, large-scale discontent, social discontent amongst the French working class about how awful things have gotten under Emmanuel Macron's premiership. So I just want to talk about that for a minute, because the British working class are too damn polite. When Partygate came about, during the pandemic, COVID, Partygate came about, and it turned out that the Conservative Party were having parties in Westminster while the whole country was locked down, and when loved ones couldn't go to hospital to see their dying relatives because of COVID restrictions, because we had to keep everyone safe and protect the NHS, we had to clap for the NHS every Thursday, we had to protect each other, we had to stay apart, we couldn't speak to each other, everything was closed, you were only allowed to leave the house once a day for exercise. Extremely, extremely harsh lockdown. While we were doing that, and letting our relatives die alone in hospitals and care homes because we weren't allowed to see them, and we were just putting up with that absolute bollocks, our Conservative leaders were having parties. They were drinking wine. They were eating cheese. They were getting absolutely blackout drunk. They were cheating on each other. You know, Dominic Raab, the old health secretary, cheated on his wife because he was drunk that night and ended up sleeping with his secretary. This is the kind of bollocks that happens in Westminster. And the working class are aware of it in Britain. We are aware that these things happen. It's on the news all the time. We're aware that this happened. And yet the only protests that seem to have happened about that have been very, very small and very, very local. In little pockets around the country, there's been protests, but they've been tiny. There's been no large eruption. There's been no widespread social discontent. None that have been organised enough to actually have a movement. We've had little isolated protests. That's it. We're too polite. This is absolutely shocking. And if it happened in any other country, there would be riots, revolutionary activity on the streets. And even now, and we wouldn't give up until that government, that party, was gone out of office. They've been kicked out completely. But no, here in Britain, we are way too polite. We let our leaders do whatever the hell they want. We can pass whatever laws. They can change the tax rates if they want. They can imprison people. They can kick university students out of campus for saying their wrong opinion on social issues. They can lock away drunk people instead of actually looking at the problem of alcoholism and acknowledging the fact that the working class are disproportionately negatively affected by alcoholism because of the shitty material conditions that they have to live in. No, instead the neoliberal and capitalist world order in Britain, they seem to just demonise and vilify these working class, these underclass. They lock them up, they fine them, they arrest them, they throw them out on the streets, they evict them from their homes, they promote the destruction of the family. These people are vile. They're getting vilified and demonised by the media and by the ruling class. These are the working class people. And that's how we're treated. And we just put up with it. We put up with it. We go to work, we do our 9 to 5, we go to school, we go to university, we sleep it off, we eat, we drink. We just let things happen. We just go with the flow. And we are way too polite. We don't speak up. And we need to take note from the French. The French have such a revolutionary history, and they today still are revolutionary. They don't let the French government do whatever they want to the people. They will protest. Even professional jobs that are supposed to be in defence of the government and the status quo, like the firefighters, they do not stand for corruption. They don't stand for dictatorial legislative power. They don't stand for the oppression and exploitation of the working class. They don't stand for it. And if protests were to happen tomorrow, the firefighters of France would join in with the workers and and clash with the police, most likely. Here, that would not happen. The middle class professions, the nurses, the teachers, the firefighters, they most likely wouldn't join in on the strikes. And we would try to keep things as business as usual as possible. So if there was a mass strike tomorrow, it would only be those who were maybe students, unemployed, and those very, very committed unionists, trade unionists in the employment industries. That's kind of it. Those are the revolutionary actors in the working class right now. Most actual workers would not join strikes or protests. And that's because we're so polite. We're so polite. We don't want to hurt anyone. We don't want to infringe. We don't want to disrupt. We don't want to cause chaos. We don't want to get our voices heard. We're quite happy to just sit back, relax, and get screwed by the government. Every single year, every day, we are getting absolutely screwed. And enough is enough. We need to take notes from other countries because we can't do this by ourselves. British communists, that's one of our biggest struggles as British communists, to speak to workers that are just so polite. They're nice, okay? They have hearts of gold, the British working class. But that's actually to our detriment. They're too nice. They're willing to put up with too much. Whereas the French, if they change the pension reforms by 2 years, millions of French people will go out and fight that and make sure that does not happen. Here, that would never happen. If that happened, we would just sit back and be like, oh, okay, well, I'm not very happy with it, but that's fine, I guess. We'll just put up with it. That's not good enough. The British working class and the French working class are so different. Despite being so geographically close to each other, we're so different, and it frustrates me dearly. If only Britain had a working class as motivated and passionate and enthusiastic and revolutionary as the French, half of the laws that currently exist in Britain would not exist because we would have fought it until that happened. And if Partygate happened in France, or if the working class were more like the French working class here, if Partygate happened, we would have fought them out of Parliament. We would have raided Parliament. We would have stormed the building. We would have not given up until the Tories were out. But no, we're too polite. We are willing to forgive way too much. And we have absolutely no revolutionary spirit amongst our working class organisations. And that needs to start happening soon. Because eventually it's going to be way too late. And eventually, down the road, the only way to achieve liberation for the working class in Britain will be through extreme forms of violence. And we don't want to get to that point. We don't want to get to it, okay? Violence is never a first option. Most communists don't like violence, but we understand that violence is a self-defense tactic. When things have been so bad for so long, and your rights and your freedoms have been restricted so much that violence is the only answer, then that is fair enough. And that, from a Marxist term, is self-defense. So we support violence when it's self-defense. But unfortunately, that is the way we're going. That is the way Britain's going to go if we don't start fighting. Because this is not good enough. We just let people do whatever we want to us, and it's not fair. We need to stand up and have our own voice. So please, if you're a British worker and you're passionate about what's happening and how things are going in this country, how downhill things are going so quickly, then join a communist organisation. Take notes from the French working class. Follow my YouTube channel and many, many other British working class YouTube channels. Take notes, educate yourself in revolutionary theory, and get yourself out on the streets and speak to people, connect to communities, and talk about the material conditions and how they have been deteriorating extremely rapidly in the past few years. And look at different countries and what their working class is doing. In the Philippines have been involved in an armed struggle for communism or socialism for about 50 or 60 years now. Look at the progresses and advances of China. Look at Cuba and their scientific and technological breakthroughs, despite being under the harshest embargoes in the world. Take notes of what the working class in other countries are doing, because if we continue to follow our British polite little etiquette path, we won't go anywhere. We won't go anywhere. We won't achieve anything. We need to start fighting. That fight needs to start now. So solidarity and comradeship with you all, and big props to the French working class who are willing to fight, actually properly fight the French authorities. Well done. You have the support of millions, hundreds of millions of people all over the world, and I hope that your demands are met. Solidarity and comradeship, and I'll see you in the next video.